As I began to think about the message God has for us today, realizing that this is the beginning of the year, and the year is still very, very young, God said to me that this year, it is true that it's going to be a year of abundance for us, but along the way, there will be some twists and turns. That may be bitter, but that is the truth. Therefore, what are those things we should concentrate upon today? In short, we will be meditating on in all things. In all things. In all things. This passage is something that we are very familiar with, and we can all begin to give our different interpretations. But I want to look at it from a different perspective today. And we know that in all things, God works for the good of those who love Him, who have been called according to His purpose. This passage expresses the sovereign love of God to mankind, especially to those who love Him, to those who have been called according to His purpose. That means that it is an expression of God's sovereign love to God's children. And as many that are called by the name of God, they are God's children. As many that are led by the Spirit of God, they are God's children. We are God's children. It is a promise for us. It is an assurance. Looking at the way it is framed, it is an assurance to us that in all things, whatsoever come our way this year, as we go through different circumstances, good and bad, God is able, He is faithful to work good out of all that we will experience this year. I will expose to us the theology of this passage. In this passage, looking at the way it is framed, and we know that all things work together for good, for those who love God, who are called according to His purpose. The spiritual message in this passage are many. We have one. This passage is saying that though we are Christians, we are not exempted from suffering. We are not exempted from difficulties in life. We are not immune to suffering. When we gave our lives to Jesus Christ, don't be deceived if anybody tells you that all your problems are over. In fact, that is just the beginning of your problems. Because the devil is not happy that he has lost you, and he will begin to do everything to get you back. Then the challenges will be greater. We are not exempted from suffering. What we are talking about is not just any kind of suffering, but righteous suffering. I want to believe that this year, one of our resolutions is to be upright, to stand for God in everything we do. Therefore, we will face challenges. We are bound to face difficulties. When you are thinking of doing what is right, when you are determined to be upright, even in your workplace, when others are manipulating and trying to play all sorts of shady games, and you are saying that no, you are standing for Jesus Christ, I tell you, my brother and sister, you will face difficulties. That is the suffering that we are talking about. That is what the context of this passage says. Righteous suffering. Jesus told the disciples in John chapter 16 verse 33 that in the world you will face trouble. In all things, there will be trouble, there will be challenges, there will be suffering on our way as a result of our faith in God. But know that God is going to work good out of those troubles for us. That is one. Another one is that we are hopeful because we know that our present suffering or difficulties are not worthy to be compared with the glory that is ahead of us. The victory we have in Jesus Christ. We know that whatever happens, whatever comes our way this year, in all things, a glory lies ahead. Amen. There is a glory set before us. Amen. Whatever challenges we may be going through in our work, maybe in our home or our family, or amongst our friends, in school, or whatever it may be, because we stand for God, that situation that looks difficult to us, let us remember that there is a glory that is before us. There is a glory ahead of us. That situation is for a purpose. There is a saying that at the end of every dark tunnel, there is light. In every silver lining, in every dark cloud, there is a silver lining. There is a glory ahead. You remember the life of Joseph? Looking at it from when he was small till he grew up and found himself in the palace. Joseph never dreamt he would be in the palace. Joseph had a dream because he was very liberal. He was plain. He was open-minded. His open-mindedness got him into trouble because he shared the dream with his brothers and they began to hate him all the more. And it was not known to Joseph that that was just the beginning of the manifestations of God's promise in his life, the beginning of God's promise coming to fulfillment in his life. Joseph found himself in the palace. He was there as a slave, but yet he feared God. Because he feared God, his fear of God, his faithfulness, his uprightness got him into another trouble. Potiphar's wife wanted to lure him into sexual immorality, but Joseph fled. He was ready to do anything just to protect his integrity in God. He fled, and what happened? Joseph was thrown in the dungeon. But yet, Joseph did not compromise. He did not disappoint God. He still held on to his faith in God. And look at all the circumstances he went through. God used it to bring about his fulfillment of his promises in his life. Because Joseph was upright and he stood for God, all things worked for his good. While in the palace, before getting to the palace, while serving as a slave, while in the prison, all things were working together for his good. Look at how God was honoring him. Even he was still made the head of those who were the fellow prisoners. He was the head because he had the gift of dream interpretation. God was really, really faithful in the life of Joseph. God used all the circumstances around his life to bring about a greater good in him. What of the life of Job? He lost everything he had in a single day. Everything precious to him. He lost his children, he lost his cattle, he lost everything you can imagine in a single day. And he went through many, many agony. But look at how God glorified himself in his life. The Bible says, the Lord blessed his latter days than his former days.